Hello everybody, it's Foo here, and today I've got another overlooked buff video for you. We're looking at the precious little delicate snowflake itself, Cryogonal, that actually isn't so delicate anymore, but we'll get into that. It's definitely got some new toys to play around with, so I'm very much looking forward to showing you all. But before we get into the video, just want to say if you like this kind of content, I really appreciate it if you showed your support by leaving a like on the video, because it helps me work out what you guys want to see more of, and it helps to promote the channel at the same time, so that would be really helpful. But if not, that's okay. So Cryogonal, pure ice type, introduced in Generation 5 with a very interesting design, really unique, which kind of makes sense because it's a snowflake and all snowflakes are unique, there's no two alike, which is so cool. Anyway, what we're gonna do is first talk about how Cryogonal used to be before Generation 7 and its really nice looking buffs. And so I'll go into some of that detail right now. Cryogonal, as I said, is an ice type, which is always contentious typing. It's really nice offensively because it's super effective against some really important things like grass types, ground types, and especially dragon types that don't have too many weaknesses. So ice typing is a really nice offensive typing to have. But unfortunately, it's really poor defensively, being weak to Stealth Rock and weak to a whole host of other Pokemon. So this is very, very scary typing, and it can go one of two ways. And that's mainly dependent on whether the Pokemon is fast or slow, really, because if it's fast enough to do what it needs to do before getting hit by attacks, then they generally tend to be quite good. Unfortunately for Cryogonal, its base 105 speed stat is really nice. That's a pretty good speed tier to be. This generation, there are quite a few things that still outspeed it, but being above 100 is really crucial and benefits this Pokemon greatly. Looking at the rest of its stats, it's got such a weird distribution of stats, I think. It's got that massive special defense stat combined with a decent enough HP stat. Nothing to write home about, but it's not too low, so it is able to take on quite a few special hits. And it's got that nice base 95 special attack stat, which means that its ice type moves will be doing decent damage. It's got that nice offensive typing, so with the speed and the special attack, it's not too shabby. It's not a nuke as such, but it's still going to be putting out some decent damage. But that's where the decent things end, because it's got 50 base attack, which you're not going to be using at all. It's really too weak. And then it's got a base defense of 30, which means that this thing is going to just keel over when hit by pretty much any physical move, especially bearing in mind that it does have that typing, which means a lot of things are super effective against it, especially, unfortunately, a lot of priority, things like Mach Punch and Bullet Punch really are going to just knock this thing out, which is a real shame. One thing to notice though is it does have Levitate, which means that it can dodge some earthquakes. That's kind of nice if you know that your opponent's choice locked, for example, but you can't really switch this thing in on an earthquake because if your opponent predicts that, it's going to take a ton of damage. So what does Cryogonal do as a Pokemon? How did it perform before this generation? One of the most crucial things is this thing gets access to Rapid Spin, and it's one of the fastest Rapid Spinners in the game. So that's a really nice thing that it does have, and a really nice niche. It also gets access to Recover, so it can stick around in the battle, being able to take some of the special hits, be able to Rapid Spin away any entry hazards. And though it is weak to Stealth Rock, it has that Levitate ability, meaning that it will dodge any damage from spikes that have been set up, or toxic spikes, for example. So that's really cool, no pun intended. It also dodges sticky webs, so it's much more reliable to get that Rapid Spin off. In terms of offense, it's got Ice Beam, which is just a nice, easy, spammable move. What's even more spammable, though, is Freeze Dry, which is fantastic because it's got great coverage against anything other than steel types, and it's super effective against those water types. Really, really great move to just spam, and that should be pretty much on any Cryogonal set, I would say. Other than that, though, its coverage isn't too great. Flash Cannon can be useful for hitting other ice types, but other than that, you're probably relying on some hidden powers. So let's talk about the buffs that it now has. And the main one, the major one, is that it did receive a stat buff, which comes in two parts. The first part is an HP boost, which is 10 points to its HP stat, which is obviously really nice because going from 70 to 80 HP, really helpful, especially with that massive special defense stat. It really does mean that it can tank some special hits. and this just means it will be bulkier in general, and it reliably takes more special hits. But the second part of this is its defense is boosted by 20 points, going from base 30 to base 50. Now base 50 is by no means good, but it means that if it's touched by a physical move, even the weakest ones, it actually stands a chance at surviving now. And yeah, as I say, it's 50 isn't anything to write home about, but it is noticeable with the base 80 HP. It does mean that it can survive things, which is so important for a Pokemon that might be performing a critical role like hazard removal, with it being a rapid spinner, and with that recover, it's so important that this thing can stay around for as long as possible. So I actually think that that defense boost is very underrated and really important for this Pokemon. It means that you will be able to take things like Ice Punches, which was always risky before. Even though you resist it, you've got such bad defense that you can't really guarantee on taking little damage from it. So good for this Pokemon, and it can definitely do its rapid spinning job a lot better with those bulk boosts. The second buff we'll talk about is the addition of Defog to its move pool, which is kind of interesting. Like, it's already got rapid spin, which a lot of people would probably consider a superior form of hazard removal, because it means that you only get rid of the hazards on your side of the field. So if you want to use Stealth Rock and Spikes yourself, they obviously stay up while you rapid spin. Whereas if you go for Defog, you're clearing away all the hazards that your opponent has set up, but all the hazards you've set up as well. Now, that is one point of view, but the other point of view is Defog is much more reliable than Rapid Spin. Rapid Spin can be blocked by spin blockers, which are ghost types. They're immune to rapid spin, and that might mean that you might not remove any hazards at all. Whereas Defog is much more reliable because you basically can target anything with Defog and get rid of those hazards. And that's really important for Cryogonal itself because it's weak to Stealth Rock, so you need to make sure that you're getting rid of that Stealth Rock while you can, so that Cryogonal can come in as many times as it can and not have to worry about taking all of that damage. And obviously it depends on what kind of a team you're building. If you don't have many hazards yourself, it doesn't matter that you're going for the Defog. Whereas if you've got other things on your team that are also weak to Stealth Rock, you definitely want to prioritize removing those hazards. So having Defog as an option is really great for Cryogonal. It means that it's a hazard remover that's much more versatile for your team, and you can play it as you want to play it. I think it's really neat, and it definitely serves itself having a more reliable entry hazard removal because of its ice typing. So those are the two main buffs, but I do want to talk about Z-moves as the final buff, because this thing has a few options here which can be kind of interesting. As a fast offensive hazard remover, Z-moves do allow Cryogonal a nuke to threaten potential spin blockers or switch-ins, so it is really fast. It's likely to be able to get this powerful Z-move off, so you could go for that Sub-Zero Slammer. Its coverage isn't fantastic, so you're probably not going to be using many Z-moves outside of Sub-Zero Slammer, but you've got plenty of potential just with that move. If you want to base it off an Ice Beam, you can, or if you want to base it off a Blizzard, for example, have Blizzard on your moveset as well as Freeze Dry. It means that you can get that very powerful Sub-Zero Slammer based off the Blizzard. You've got Freeze Dry there for reliable accuracy and coverage for the water types, and if you need to just go for a normal non-Z Blizzard, you can try that as well. So I think that that's an interesting option for this Pokemon, which tends to be offensive just because of its speed and special attack stats. An interesting option, however, could be Z Solar Beam, which, by the way, it learns Solar Beam via level up, which is kind of weird. I guess maybe just because it's reflective, but it's kind of strange. But anyway, you can create a powerful Bloom Doom that requires no recharge turn for the Solar Beam. So that could be really interesting in terms of getting rid of some of your opponent's water types. However, Cryogonal already has that Freeze Dry move, which is probably all you need to get rid of water types as it is, so I would say probably stick with that. In terms of status Z moves, Cryogonal has a couple of really nice options, though they're not necessarily all that viable. First off, we've got Z Confuse Ray, which is a tactic I've previously showcased with Gengar. This 100% skill-based Z move is kind of interesting because it gives you a +1 special attack while confusing the opponent, potentially offering you free turns.
It works. It just works.
What's interesting to note is that Cryogonal was not previously able to boost its special attack at all, so the introduction of Z moves allows this, and at +1 special attack, with Freeze Dry there aren't going to be many Pokemon that want to switch in on that. Though you might just be better running Never Melt Ice, because that means that you can save a move slot on Cryogonal, you don't have to run Confuse Ray. And it means that all of your freeze dries will be boosted by the Never Melt Ice. You don't just have this one-off setup opportunity, you've got kind of more consistent damage. Alternatively, you could run Z Hail, which gives +1 speed to Cryogonal, gets chip damage off on your opponent because they're buffeted by the hail, and it lets Cryogonal run Blizzard that will always hit. So obviously that gives you a slight power boost as well. If you're getting the speed boost, you might be able to run Modest too rather than Timid, because most Cryogonal sets will be Timid. So this gives you an opportunity to sweep, definitely in the late game, but generally your opponent's team will need to be weakened first, and it doesn't have too many coverage moves, so you might want to remove their steel types first, have a Magnet Pull Pokemon to support maybe. But with enough wind behind its back in this hail snowstorm, this once weak Snowflake can become a blizzarding avalanche. So there you have it. Those are my suggestions for Cryogonal. I think it's a very pretty Pokemon. I really like its design and it's so unique. There aren't many Pokemon that are this unique. It's got some nice utility as well. I always like Pokemon with interesting utility moves. The fact that it has Recover, that it has Hazard Removal, I think is great. It does have screens as well. It has Light Screen and Reflect, which is pretty interesting. So it does have more options than I've talked about here. It's got things like Haze, which can be really great in stopping your opponent from setting up. I really advocate you giving this thing a try if you haven't tried it before. It's only better at what it used to be able to do. Freeze Dry with 105 base speed is just so nice to spam. And that's it really. So yeah, give Cryogonal a try. If you did like this video, I'd really appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. All that's left to be said is I've been Foo, you've been awesome, and hopefully see you next time. Goodbye.